I want you to imagine a country where the economy has, well, it's essentially stopped breathing. We aren't talking about a recession. We're not even talking about a downturn. We are talking about a place where the basic function of money, the ability to buy things and know what they'll cost, has just completely broken down.
It sounds like the setting of a dystopian novel,
Right.
right? But this was the reality for one of the largest economies in South America just a couple of years ago.
Exactly. Imagine walking into a grocery store. You pick up a carton of milk. By the time you get to the register, the price might have actually changed. That isn't an exaggeration. We are talking about 200% annual inflation.
Which is a number so high, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. It means prices are tripling every single year.
And the social mood that goes with that, it wasn't just anger.
Yeah.
It was despair. You have parents literally watching their children, educated, bright young people, packing their bags and leaving the country.
And not because they want to travel.
No, but because there is simply no future for them at home. It's what everyone was calling the youth exodus.
It's a demographic tragedy, really.
Mm.
And on top of all that, you had a government that, I mean, it seemed to be actively trying to disconnect the country from the modern world. They banned specific technologies like satellite internet, leaving huge parts of the rural population in the digital dark ages.
So you have this recipe for total collapse, a 5% GDP deficit. You have capital controls trapping money inside the borders like a prison. And you have a regulatory environment that seemed designed to suffocate anyone even thinking about starting a business.
And then right in the middle of this absolute chaos, the country elects a man who describes himself as an anarcho-capitalist.
A term I still have trouble defining at parties.
You and me both. But here's this guy who campaigns with a literal chainsaw in his hands, promising to slice through the state bureaucracy. He has this wild hair, he screams at what he calls the political caste, and he promises pain before gain. It honestly sounds like the plot of a movie that is just too unbelievable to get greenlit.
But it happened. We are, of course, talking about Argentina and the election of Javier Milei.
A turning point that I think history books are going to be analyzing for decades to come.
Right. And today, we aren't just talking about the election. We are looking back. The source material we have is from January 2026. So we are sitting exactly 2 years into this presidency. The madman with the chainsaw has been in the driver's seat for 24 months.
And that is what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We aren't speculating anymore on what might happen. We're not looking at campaign promises. We have hard data now. We have results. We can actually analyze what is arguably the most radical economic experiment of the 21st century.
The mission for today is simple, but it's heavy. Is it working? We're going to look at the numbers that shouldn't be possible, the bizarre legal loopholes he used to balance the budget, the cultural shift, and this is key, the massive dangers that are still lurking just around the corner. Because it's not all sunshine and roses.
Oh, far from it. And to guide us through this, we're looking at a conversation between Michael Carnu from the Atlas Network and Marcos Falcone. Falcone is a policy analyst at the Cato Institute. But more importantly for us, he's an Argentine native. He's been tracking this libertarian movement since before it was even a blip on anyone's radar.
He's got that insider perspective. He's not just looking at charts in Washington, D.C. He's looking at his hometown. He's talking to his family. So let's set the scene properly before we get to the chainsaw. Take us back to late 2023 in Argentina. We mentioned 200% inflation. We mentioned the deficit. But what does that actually feel like for a society?
It feels like chaos. When Falcone describes that period, he uses that exact word, a chaotic country. You have to understand, the economy hadn't grown in over a decade.
A decade? Wait, really?
10 years. Think about that for a second. That is an entire generation of lost growth. If you entered the workforce in 2013, by 2023, you had never seen a healthy economy. You had never known stability.
That is just soul-crushing.
It is. And because of the capital controls, you couldn't get goods into the country. Businesses couldn't import the parts they needed to fix machines. They couldn't move their profits out to pay investors. It was like a prison for capital. And that breeds this very specific kind of pessimism. Falcone mentions hearing older people say things like, our children are leaving and there's nothing we can do to stop them.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have high prices. It's a whole other thing to feel like the nation itself is just dissolving. Like the fundamental promise of work hard and get ahead has just been deleted from the system.
And then there's the regulatory absurdity. Falcone brings up this one specific example that really highlights how disconnected the previous government was from reality. They had banned Starlink.
Starlink, the satellite internet service. Why on earth would you ban that?
Well, protectionism, ideology, a desire to control information, you can take your pick. But think about the geography of Argentina for a minute. It is the 8th largest country in the world. It has a massive agricultural sector working in these incredibly remote areas. The Pampas.
Right, where you can drive for hours and see nothing but cows and soy fields.
Exactly. And by 2023, if you are a modern farmer, you need data. You need weather reports, you need market prices, you need logistics. If you aren't connected to the global economy through the internet, you basically don't exist. Banning Starlink wasn't just some tech policy. It was an economic death sentence for the rural workforce. It was actively keeping them in the 1990s while the rest of the world moved on.
Okay, so let me paint the picture again. You have a 5% deficit. You have 200% inflation. You have trapped money. You have a government blocking basic infrastructure like the internet. Enter Javier Milei in December 2023. He takes office, and everyone, the IMF, the global banks, the serious pundits in suits, they all say fixing this will take years. Years of painful, slow adjustment.
They said it was impossible to fix quickly. The social cost would just be too high to do anything drastic.
And Milei essentially says, hold my mate.
He really did. Let's talk about Section 1, the shock therapy. Because Falcone drops a bombshell in the source material that we really need to unpack. He says Milei balanced the budget in 1 month.
1 month. 30 days.
Yes. From a 5% deficit to 0.
Okay, stop. How is that physically possible? I mean, usually to cut a budget, you have to pass laws, you have to debate in Congress, you have to fight with unions, you have to phase things in. How do you wipe out a massive deficit in 30 days? Did he just fire everyone on day one?
No, and this is where it gets so interesting. It defies what political scientists usually call political gravity. Usually when a country is in this bad of a shape, the government has 2 choices. Option A, default on the debt. Admit you can't pay.
Which ruins your credit rating for a generation.
Right. Or option B, hyperinflate. Print money until the debt is worthless, but destroy the savings of every single citizen in the process. Milei did neither. He just stopped spending.
Cold turkey.
But the way he did it is the real story here.
Yeah.
Falcone explains this budget loophole that is honestly one of the cleverest and maybe most ruthless political maneuvers I've ever heard of. It's a little technical, but stick with me because it's brilliant.
Okay, lay it on me. I love a good loophole.
So Argentina didn't pass a budget for 2024 initially. The Congress, which Milei didn't control, we'll get to that later, they didn't give him a new budget to work with.
Which usually shuts down a government, right? Like we see in the U.S. every couple of years. The government shut down theater.
In Argentina, the law is different. It says if you don't pass a new budget, the president is allowed to continue to use the previous year's budget figures.
Okay. So he has to use the 2023 numbers. So what?
Now think about the math. Think about the inflation.
The 2023 budget was written in 2023 pesos. But by 2024, inflation was running at 200%.
Exactly. So let's just use a simple analogy. Let's say the 2023 budget allocated 1 million pesos for road maintenance in a specific province. In 2023, 1 million pesos could buy you, let's say, 10 tons of asphalt.
Okay, with you so far.
By early 2024, because of that 200% inflation, the price of asphalt has tripled. 1 million pesos now only buys you, what, maybe 3 tons of asphalt?
Oh, I see where this is going.
Milei just kept the nominal numbers the same. He said, okay, the law says I can spend the 2023 amount, I will spend exactly that amount. He sent the province 1 million pesos.
But that money is effectively worthless, or at least worth a lot less.
Precisely. He effectively cut real spending by 60 or 70% simply by not updating the numbers for inflation.
He used the inflation against the system. He let the inflation do the dirty work of austerity for him.
That's the perfect way to put it. Economists call it liquefaction. He liquefied the real value of public expenditure.
But wait a second, that sounds clever on paper, but let's talk about the human impact. If you are a public university or a hospital and you get the same check as last year, but your electricity bill has tripled, you are effectively bankrupt. You can't turn the lights on.
You are absolutely right. And that was the shock. That was the pain. Construction sites literally stopped in the middle of the day because the government checks couldn't cover the cost of cement anymore. Universities had to cut hours. It was brutal. It was a massive transfer of cost. But from a purely fiscal perspective, it worked instantly.
Because he didn't need Congress to approve a cut. He just followed the old law.
Exactly. He didn't have to stand at a podium and say, I am cutting education by 50%. He just said, I am following the budget you gave me. It shielded him politically while achieving a level of austerity that usually causes revolutions.
That is devious. Ruthless, but you have to admit it's effective. So he balances the budget in January 2024. What happened to inflation? Because usually when you stop printing money, inflation should stop, right?
Eventually. But it didn't vanish overnight. It's like turning a giant ship. In December 2023, the month he took over, inflation peaked at 25% per month.
Let's just pause there. 25% a month. I want you to really think about that. That means if you buy a coffee on the first of the month for $2, by the 30th, it costs $2.50 every single month.
It creates this panic psychology.
Yeah.
You get paid, and you literally run to the store to spend the money immediately. Because if you hold it for a week, you lose value. It just destroys the ability to save.
So where are we now? We're sitting in 2026.
By early 2026, when this interview takes place, Falcone notes that inflation is down to about 2% to 2.5% per month.
Which, let's be honest, is still high if you were in the US or Europe. We freak out if inflation is 3% a year.
Oh, it's high globally, yes. That's still about 35% annually. But for Argentina, that's what they call low and stable. It's a miracle compared to where they were. The panic is gone. You can price things again.
So the shock therapy worked on the balance sheet. The bleeding stopped. But a country isn't just a balance sheet. It's people, it's businesses, it's rules. This brings us to Section 2, the chainsaw.
The deregulation aspect. This is where Milei's ideology really comes into play.
We talked about the Starlink ban being lifted. That connects the farms. But Falcone mentions something that sounds like a joke from a libertarian meme page, but is apparently real: the Ministry for Deregulation.
It is very real. And it is headed by a guy named Federico Sturzenegger. And unlike the Department of Government Efficiency we sometimes hear about in U.S. proposals, this ministry has a singular, dedicated job. Falcone says they literally sit in offices all day thinking about what rules to delete.
Their entire job description is Control-Alt-Delete.
Basically. They aren't trying to make better rules. They're trying to find rules that shouldn't exist in the first place. They even set up an anonymous website where citizens can log on and report regulations that are stopping them from working.
That's fascinating. It's like crowdsourcing the destruction of red tape. Hey, there's a law from 1950 that says I can't import this specific screw I need for my machine.
Reported, reviewed, deleted. It completely shifts the power dynamic. Instead of the citizen begging the state for permission, the citizen is telling the government what is in the way.
But does Falcone give us a concrete example of this working? Because deregulation is often this buzzword politicians use. We cut red tape. But regular people don't always feel it. Does it actually change daily life?
He gives the perfect example, the one that hits home for everyone, whether you are in New York, London, or Buenos Aires. Rent control.
Oh, this is the classic debate. Every major city on Earth fights about this.
Oh, this is the classic debate. Every major city on Earth fights about this.
Right, and usually the political wisdom is rent is too high, tenants are suffering, so we must cap prices to protect them.
Right.
Argentina had very strict rent control laws. Long contracts, price caps, very difficult to evict anyone.
And the logic is compassionate, right? I mean, you don't want people thrown out on the street.
The intention is compassionate. But Falcone explains the result. Landlords looked at the law and said, okay, if I rent this apartment out, I can't adjust the price for inflation, so I'm guaranteed to lose money. And if the tenant stops paying, I can't get them out for years.
It's a terrible business decision to rent your property. Awful. So what did they do? They just didn't. They locked the doors, they left apartments empty, they sold them, or they put them on Airbnb for tourists in dollars. Anything but rent to a local.
So you had a city full of empty apartments and people desperate for housing who couldn't find a place to live.
Exactly. Supply was zero.
So Milei comes in. What does he do?
He issued this mega deregulation decree just 10 days after taking office. He didn't tweak the rent control. He didn't adjust the caps. He banned the concept entirely. He removed all price controls on rentals. He said, you can sign a contract in pesos, in dollars, in Bitcoin, or in kilos of beef. I don't care. The state is out of it.
Now, if you listen to the critics, they would scream that this is insane, that landlords would triple rents overnight and throw grandmas out on the street.
That was the prediction. Total doom and gloom. But Falcone's gives us the data from 1 year later. And this is where economic theory met a very harsh reality. When you remove the price cap and you remove the fear that the landlord can't control their own property, what happens?
The landlords feel safe to rent again.
Exactly. Thousands of owners who were keeping their apartments empty suddenly put them back on the market. The supply of apartments in Buenos Aires rose by 200%.
A 200% increase in available apartments? That's an explosion of inventory.
Yes. And here is the kicker. Basic Economics 101. When supply floods the market, What happens to the price?
It has to go down.
Real prices, meaning prices adjusted for inflation, dropped by 30%.
Wait, I want to make sure I got that right. By removing the law that was supposed to keep prices down, prices actually went down.
It's so counterintuitive, but yes. By removing the friction, the market functioned. It became a tenant's market because there were suddenly so many options. Falcone highlights this as something people can physically feel. It isn't abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. A young couple can now find an apartment that changes your life.
That is a powerful story. It really challenges how we are usually taught to think about tenant protection. What else got the chainsaw treatment?
Open skies agreements.
Airline deregulation.
Yes. Previously, the state airline, Aerolíneas Argentinas, had a massive monopoly. It was very hard for competitors to fly routes. Milei opened it up. Falcone says this is shaping up to be a huge boom area, more flights, cheaper tickets, connecting the provinces.
And I assume the money situation changed too.
Big time. As of January 1st, 2026, the capital controls were fully lifted.
That means businesses can finally move money in and out freely.
Correct. For a decade, if you invested $1 in Argentina, it was like putting it in a Roach motel. You could check in, but you couldn't check out. Now the doors are open, which signals to the world, we are normal again, you can trust us.
Okay, so economically, he's moving at light speed, but politically. This is Section 3, governing without power. Because you reminded me earlier, when he won in 2023, he was a total outsider. He didn't have a party machine.
He had almost nothing. It's hard to overstate how weak he was on paper. In his first 2 years, Milei's party held only about 10 to 15% of Congress.
10%. He was a minority president in the extreme. In the U.S., if a president doesn't have Congress, they're a lame duck. They can't do anything. How do you pass radical laws with only 10% of the vote?
With great difficulty and a lot of negotiation. Falcone mentions the omnibus bill. It was Milei's massive reform package. It was supposed to be this huge transformation of everything.
Right.
It got chopped up. It ended up being much shorter than intended because he simply lacked the votes. He had to compromise. He was surviving, but he was fragile. The opposition, the Peronists, could have theoretically crushed him if they had coordinated perfectly.
But they didn't.
They underestimated him. And then came October 2025, the midterms.
This was the test.
This was the referendum on the entire experiment. The public had lived through the shock therapy. They'd lived through the budget cuts, the liquefaction, the recession in that first year. And usually, austerity makes you unpopular. Usually, if you cut spending, you get voted out.
You made my life harder. Get out.
But Milei's party swept the election.
They rewarded him for it.
They rewarded the results. They saw inflation drop. They saw the rent prices drop. They saw the chaos subsiding, and they gave him a big thumbs up. So now, as of this 2026 discussion, Milei controls about 40% of the House and 1/3 of the Senate.
1/3 doesn't sound like a majority. Why is that number so significant?
It isn't a majority, but it's a strategic magic number in Argentine politics. Falcone explains that this 1/3 threshold protects him from having his vetoes overridden.
Ah, it's a shield.
Exactly. If the opposition wants to pass a law that Milei hates, say, a law to increase spending by $1 billion, Milei can veto it. To override that veto and force the law through, the opposition needs 2/3 of the vote.
And if Milei holds 1/3 plus 1...
They can't touch him. He is effectively bulletproof.
That changes the whole game for the second half of his term, doesn't it?
It does. Falcone says he is no longer just surviving. He has a mandate. He can stop the opposition from blowing up the budget. And if he builds alliances with the center-right, he can actually pass new laws, not just use decrees. He can start building the country he actually wants, not just fixing the mess of the last guy.
It's an incredible political turnaround, but I want to pivot a bit. We've talked numbers and politics. Who are these people? Who is Falcone? And honestly, what is the vibe of this movement? This brings us to Section 4, the cultural and human side.
Falcone's backstory is actually quite representative of this new generation of libertarians in Latin America. It's not an elite movement from the universities.
Yeah, he mentions discovering these ideas at 15 via Facebook.
Facebook and YouTube. It's a digital grassroots movement. He started a podcast during the pandemic lockdown. It's that classic story of bored, curious people finding alternative ideas online when the mainstream narrative, the state will protect you, was failing them. During COVID, the Argentine state was very restrictive and the economy was crashing. Young people looked for answers and found Milei on YouTube screaming about central banks.
And Falcone actually met Milei way back in 2014, right? Before the hair was famous, before the chainsaw.
This is a great anecdote. Falcone was just 19 years old. He won an essay contest and went to this event in Tucumán, a province in the north. Milei was there, but he was a nobody. He was just an economist brought along by a more famous politician, Ricardo Lopez Murphy.
He was the +1 at the event.
Exactly.
Mm.
Falcone says Milei was totally off the radar. But he was friendly, curious, talked to this 19-year-old kid about economics. Falcone uses this to tell donors and activists, you never know where your next Milei is going to be.
That's a good lesson.
Milei wasn't a career politician. He was a product of this think tank ecosystem, just fermenting in the background for a decade, waiting for the right moment. It's a reminder that these overnight successes are rarely overnight.
Now, speaking of culture, we've been talking heavy economics, liquefaction, crawling pegs, deficits. I think we need a break. I think we need to eat.
I was waiting for this.
Yeah.
You cannot analyze Argentina without understanding the asado.
The barbecue. I got hungry just reading the transcript. Let's paint this picture for the listener. What is the Argentine experience, according to Falcone?
It's simplicity. That's the key word. In the U.S., when we barbecue, we use revs, marinades, heavy BBQ sauce. We smoke things for 12 hours. Falcone is very specific. In Argentina, that is a crime.
So what is it then?
It's meat and salt.
That's it.
You rely on the quality of the beef. Falcone says maybe a little chimichurri on the side, but you do not drown the flavor.
And the cuts. I need to know what to order if I go.
He lists 3 essentials. First, entraña, that's cert steak. It's thin, fatty, and you cook it fast and hot.
Delicious. My favorite.
Second, ojo de bife, the ribeye.
Yeah.
The classic. And third, salchicha peralera, the barbecue sausage.
And that's accompanied by?
Fries. Always fries. And of course, red wine. Malbec from Mendoza.
It sounds perfect. But Falcone connects this to the economy, too. He talks about tourism.
He basically plays tour guide. He pitches Mendoza for the wine in the Andes Mountains. He talks about Patagonia and Bariloche, which he says looks like a Swiss town just dropped into South America. He mentions his hometown, Mar del Plata, which is the main beach city, and Iguazu Falls in the jungle.
It sounds like a paradise.
It is. And he notes that tourism is booming because the country is stabilizing. People are curious. They want to see the Milei phenomenon up close. But, and this is the segue to our next section, there is a catch.
There's always a catch.
If you were a tourist planning a trip to Argentina right now, in 2026, you might be in for a bit of a shock.
Why is that?
The prices. This is section 5, the danger zone. We said everything is going great, budget balanced, rent down. But Falcone sounds a very serious alarm bell here regarding exchange rates.
This is the critical analysis where we need to put the skeptic hat back on. It isn't all perfect. What is the crawl he talks about?
Okay, this gets a little technical, but imagine the Argentine economy is a pressure cooker.
Okay, pressure cooker, I'm with you.
The heat underneath is inflation. Even though it's down, it's still there. Usually, to let the steam out, a country lets its currency lose value. If you have 30% inflation, your currency should drop by about 30% against the dollar so that your prices stay competitive globally.
Right. If a steak costs double the pesos, but the peso is worth half as many dollars, the price in dollars stays the same. Balance.
Exactly. But Milei is terrified of letting the currency drop too fast because in Argentina, people have a kind of PTSD about the dollar. If the dollar goes up, shopkeepers panic and raise prices on the shelf instantly. It triggers more inflation.
So he's holding the lid down on the pressure cooker?
He's holding it down with both hands. The government is using what's called a crawling peg. They are letting the peso lose value very, very slowly, much slower than the inflation rate.
So the peso is artificially strong.
Yes. And the result is that Argentina is becoming incredibly expensive in U.S. dollar terms.
Ah, so the famous discount is gone.
Falcone mentions that tourists noticed a massive price jump from 2023 to 2024. If you went to Buenos Aires in 2023 with dollars, you lived like a king. A steak dinner was $5.
And in 2026.
It's priced like Miami. Maybe not quite that extreme, but the bargain is over. And this is dangerous.
Why?
Because you can't be a developing economy with Swiss prices. It just doesn't work. If you're too expensive, tourists stop coming. But worse, companies stop hiring Argentine workers because they can hire cheaper labor in Brazil or Mexico. Exports like wine and soy become too expensive for other countries to buy. Growth stalls.
So they are trapped. If they let the peso go, inflation returns. If they prop it up, the economy becomes too expensive and stalls out.
Exactly. It's a tightrope walk over a canyon. And Falcone warns that this exchange rate policy is the thing that concerns him the most. It's artificial. It can't last forever.
So what is the solution? Milei has fixed the budget, but he hasn't fixed the money itself. What does the Cato Institute and Falcone propose?
Dollarization.
The full switch. Ditch the peso entirely. Use the US dollar as the official currency.
Yes. Burn the ships.
Like Cortez. No retreat.
Exactly. The argument is not just about economic stability. It's about politics. It's about binding the hands of future politicians.
How so?
If Milei dollarizes the economy, he takes away the money printer. Forever. The Central Bank of Argentina effectively loses its power to print money to fund the government.
So a future president, maybe a populist who wants to spend billions to win an election, can't just print money to do it.
Correct. They would have to raise taxes, which is unpopular, or borrow, which is hard. They can't just inflate away their debt. Falcone argues that Argentina has battled inflation for 80 years. The peso has zero trust. The people don't want it.
They already save in dollars, right? I've heard real estate is bought and sold in cash dollars.
It is. The economy is already de facto dollarized in people's minds. Falcone's argument is, make it official. Anchor the reforms permanently. Milei wants to be remembered as the man who killed inflation forever. The only way to guarantee that is to kill the currency that causes it.
That is a high-stakes gamble. You lose control of your monetary policy. You depend on the U.S. Federal Reserve. But given the history of Argentina, I can see why they would want to tie their own hands.
It's the ultimate Ulysses binding himself to the mast move.
So let's look forward to Section 6, the future outlook. We are in 2026. Milei has a stronger Congress, the budget is balanced, rent prices are down, but the country is expensive. What is next on the menu?
3 big battles. First, labor reform.
Why is that the priority?
Because the Argentine labor market is incredibly rigid. It is very hard to fire people. The severance costs are astronomical.
Which sounds good for the worker, in theory.
In theory. But in practice, it means businesses are terrified to hire anyone. So you have this massive informal economy people working under the table with no rights at all. Falcone points out that as the economy opens up to global competition, businesses need flexibility. If they can't adapt, they will go under, and you get mass unemployment. Milei needs to make the labor market fluid to prevent a jobs crisis.
What's the second thing?
Privatization. Selling off the state-owned businesses.
Like the airline.
The airline, the media companies, the trains. Milei's view is that the state should not be running businesses. It's inefficient, and it loses taxpayer money. He wants to sell them off to the private sector.
And the third?
Trade. Specifically, the Mercosur problem.
Mercosur is the trade bloc, right?
Yeah.
Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's sort of a South American version of the EU's trade zone, but much, much more protectionist. It has high tariffs to the outside world.
To protect local industries from Chinese or American competition?
Mostly to protect Brazilian industries, to be honest. Argentina is kind of trapped inside this high tariff wall.
So they can't just sign a free trade deal with the U.S. or Europe on their own?
Not easily. The rules say they have to negotiate as a bloc. Milei wants free trade. He wants to lower tariffs to zero. So he has a tough choice. Try to reform Mercosur from within, which is slow and painful, or threaten to leave it.
That sounds like a diplomatic nightmare waiting to happen. Brazil is their biggest neighbor.
It is. But if Milei is serious about being an anarcho-capitalist open economy, he can't stay behind a protectionist wall forever.
And finally, Falcone predicts something about Milei's political future.
Re-election?
He thinks he runs again.
He thinks he runs, and he thinks he wins. And if he succeeds and gets a full majority in Congress, that opens the door for what he calls second and third generation reforms.
What does that mean?
The deep structural changes, changing the education system, changing the health system, reforms that take decades to truly set in. Falcone believes Milei isn't just a blip. He's trying to rewrite the entire operating system of the country for the next 50 years.
It's incredible to think about. We started this deep dive talking about a country that was essentially hopeless. 200% inflation, parents weeping as their kids left the country. And now, just 2 years later, we're talking about second-generation reforms and a potential re-election of a libertarian.
It really is a case study for the history books. Whether you agree with his politics or not, you just cannot deny the magnitude of the shift.
So let's wrap this up. What are the key takeaways for you? What sticks in your brain?
For me, it's the contrast between the abstract and the concrete. We saw the impossible task of balancing the budget, which Milei did by the sheer force of a clever legal loophole in liquefaction.
The ruthless accountant maneuver.
Exactly. But then we saw the tangible reality of deregulation, the rent control story. That is real life. That is a landlord unlocking a door and a family moving in. It shows that policy actually matters.
And the political shift from a fragile minority surviving day to day to a strengthened administration with a real mandate after the midterms.
But we cannot ignore the warning. The country is expensive. The crawl is dangerous. The currency is still the Achilles heel of the entire plan.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on.
It does. And this is the question I want you, the listener, to sit with. Milei has done the impossible by balancing the budget. That's a bookkeeping victory. But the real test is the money itself.
How so?
If he doesn't dollarize, if he leaves the peso in existence, could a future administration, 5 or 10 years from now, simply reverse everything? Could they just turn the money printer back on?
Is the Argentine miracle a permanent change, or is it just a pause in 80 years of decline?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. The chains are off the economy for now, but the printing press is still in the room. And as long as it's there, the temptation to use it remains.
A fascinating, hopeful, and slightly terrifying place to leave it. Thank you for walking us through this radical experiment.
My pleasure.
And thank you for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.